Hello to everyone watching on my YouTube channel and this specific video. This video that I'm making now is to speak about load shedding and why load shedding is actually necessary. And some of you might have seen the April Fool's article saying that we will in future have less load shedding, but when we do have load shedding, it will be for an entire week. This is obviously just a very well written April Fool's joke, and I hope you people haven't fallen for this. But let's get to the serious part of actual load shedding and why the Eskom grids actually needs to load shed industry, houses, and anything that could jeopardize the grid and the grid integrity to make sure that our power grid does not collapse completely. The first thing that you need to understand about load shedding is that it is a necessity. In other words, it's not something that is nice to have. At National Control, there's very competent people sitting there actually load shedding continuously. And load shedding has been happening since 2006 when we started running into energy supply problems. And actually it started before that. From around 2002, we knew that our national grid would get strained and that we would soon reach a point where we would run out of the capacity to supply the need on the grid. Now, any grid is a perfect supply and demand customer situation. Unlike any other industry in the world, in the electricity demand industry, you actually have to supply exactly what is asked for. And this is obviously a very complex thing to accomplish. And you need a lot of trained technical staff to perform this job. And for the public and the media to make statements on this is really not that intellectual, because until you understand the complicity and the extreme complications of load shedding, choosing where to load shed, choosing how much to load shed, you should really not comment. And that's why I would like to educate you to the point where you can ask questions, you can ask me questions, you can ask questions of any other power generation expert and get the knowledge that you need to have an informed understanding of load shedding. Our national grid is kept at 50 Hertz. Now, all the appliances in your house actually functions on 50 Hertz, except for instance for an incandescent light bulb, which would glow if you put the required voltage across the filament. But your beater in the kitchen, your fridge compressor, they all work on 50 Hertz. And if that frequency drops, your equipment does not work optimally. So Eskom has to maintain the grid at 50 Hertz at all times. Now, the bigger a power grid, the more stable that power grid becomes. So a large power grid is much better than a small power grid because you have redundancy of supply. There's more generators supplying into the grid, but they are all supplying exactly the same thing. You, the customer, at the other end of the grid. So it's important to understand that to keep this grid stable, if demand increases too much, the frequency starts to drop. So if all the units, the IPPs, the Eskom units cannot meet the demand at any given point in time, the grid frequency drops. When the grid frequency drops to a certain set point, which is below 48 Hertz, the generators on the Eskom grid will separate from the grid. In other words, the output breakers will open to protect the machines, which means that we'll have a total blackout. And that is why it is so important for load shedding to take place. It's not to inconvenience you, it is actually to help us keep the grid going. Now, how does Eskom achieve this? Since 2006 and even slightly before, Eskom has been load shedding all the big consumers on the Eskom grid, who has power purchase agreements with Eskom that is far cheaper than what we pay for electricity. The reason why they pay less is because they are the first to be load shed when there is a problem with the grid frequency. So the big aluminium smelters in Richards Bay and so on, they get load shed first. And the public don't even know about this. You're not going to see it in the media. It'll only be recorded in National Control's logbooks. But I have seen these logs and I can tell you that industry is being load shedded daily. And it's very irregular when industry is not actually being load shed on a daily basis. And this has been happening since 2006. So the fact that you don't see load shedding doesn't mean that load shedding is not happening on the national grid. It is happening. It's only when things get really bad that you as the public gets affected, because then we moan and complain. And obviously at that stage it affects politicians. And the moment that politicians get affected, they start to shout and scream, and they start to make statements, and they have their own agendas. And I'm not here to speak politics, I'm here to speak technical facts. So according to me, politicians should stay out of the electricity generation industry completely. Now, Eskom has been doing a very good job up until now in keeping the grid stable, because we have not had a grid collapse. And there has been many instances where it might have been possible. Another thing that I need to explain is that the larger the unit that you have on the grid, a specific generator unit, that you lose, the greater effect it would actually have on the national grid. Therefore, it is very important to make sure that the units on the Eskom grid, as well as all the different units, the wind turbines, the solar, is kept as stable as possible, so that the people at National Control don't sit with the nightmares that they have to experience when a unit trips, because they have to make up for that loss somehow, and that can either happen through load shedding or for a hot standby coal-fired power station that has the ability to ramp up, or for maybe one of the pump storage schemes like Drakensberg or Palmit to actually start up and generate power to alleviate the loss that we've experienced on the grid.